All right, so good evening, everyone. And as you heard, Doug already mentioned my name. I'm Priya, and I am honored to be the opening act for today's show. Um, um, yeah, it's going to be a little bit of back and forth. And standing up here, I'm definitely getting the Mrs. Marvelous Maisel vibes, when I came to know that I'm going to talk and I haven't done this in a while, and definitely not with an audience where I don't know many of you. So I was getting the jitters and I was like, okay, how is it going to turn out? And I said, okay, think about her. So maybe this all turns out well. But looking at the slide here, you might be thinking, am I in the right place? Does this sound like a technical writer's role? And I promise you, it is going to be if you just stick with me for a little bit. What are we going to be learning, or what I'm trying to share from my experience over the last 1 year, is we look at a little bit of acknowledgement where we are today, what this fantastic AI ride feels like for us, and a little bit of thinking together. Where can we go with it? And what each of us can do when we walk out of here from our side, right? But before we go any deeper with that, I'd like to share a little bit about me, because I know many of you are just meeting me for the first time, and I haven't even gotten a chance to network as much with many of you. Perhaps the next time I'd be able to do that more. Today being a day when I'm speaking, I didn't get a chance, but yeah. So as Doug mentioned, I manage the content experience team at Salesforce. I manage a few CX teams for various products. And before I got here, I've worn many different hats, right, from programming to QA to project management. And hence, this cat has had 9 lives. And before I stuck with being a leader in the content experience team. I live in East Bay, Doug just mentioned, and I love the trails around. And right now it feels like I'm deep in the midlife crisis where I'm raising a teenager. And so that's added on top of the all the roller coaster ride with AI, right? So the last 1 year, as many of you have probably been experiencing this AI transformation, I've been trying to figure out how to lead teams through this big change. And I'll be sharing a few of my reflections from the experience that I've had. And I think the main question of how can we help our teams do their jobs better and in a more human way. One is the transformation and technology aspect, but really the human way of how can we retain the creative aspect, the judgment, and the trust that we can maintain with our teams. So how many of you feel somewhat similar to this graphic here where, in the middle of good times, it's the best of times and it's the worst of times? Yeah, pretty much everyone, right? We don't know what's happening, but yet we are there. And how many of you know where this quote comes from? Who's the famous author or the book? All right, I hear some answers. Yes, it is Charles Dickens. So when Charles Dickens wrote this phrase almost about 150 years back, he hardly had any idea what AI was. But yet this phrase is very apt for the times we are in today. It is the worst of times because there's so much uncertainty and there's almost a quiet fear among people. What if our roles or our jobs are going to be outpaced by machines, right? And good times because innovation has never been as fast as what we see today. It's just amazing. So yes, best of good times and bad times. So what we'll explore through this session is, first of all, what AI transformation, what we are doing with it today, how are we working today with AI? Next is, what role does the human edge have to play in all the AI transformations that we are doing today in reshaping the work we do? And how can leaders help in this era of AI? Um, Most of you might have can probably relate to the four quadrants here, using AI in many different ways. AI as a collaborator. I don't know how many of you at your companies have already started to gather information and have AI be the creator of content right from the beginning, getting content from all different various artifacts. So definitely a content collaborator, first draft creation, image creation, quality checker, even for complex tasks such as agents, performing series of tasks or action plans, creating action plans based on customer needs. Definitely what I use it for example, is an AI assistant. Try setting up meetings across 6 different time zones, 20 different people, whose calendar looks like a game of Tetris on steroids, right? It's crazy. So AI definitely helps. But we all know how this works, and we're pretty much there. But there is a very important aspect which many of us fail to recognize and realize, which is the human edge. That seems to be the missing piece. So for any AI innovation story, there are two pieces to it, right? One is the mindset, like how just Doug mentioned. It's coming at us. What are we going to do about it? Change is the only constant. How are we going to look at it at its face and change along with it? So what is that mindset, and how can we help our teams get the right mindset? The other one is, how do you create that environment? Because mindset alone will not help. You need that right environment where your teams can be successful. So to begin with, for the mindset, looking at your problem as a problem or as an opportunity to improve the work that you do. Is it helping you in some way? Is it making your work faster? Is it making your work easier? Is one of the right mindsets to acquire. The other is recognizing gaps and opportunities. Right now, a lot of us still probably document feature work, right? But looking ahead, one big opportunity is connecting the dots, the end-to-end documentation, the JDBTs, jobs to be done. Are we looking at it from that perspective? That's definitely one of the areas we need to be thinking more in the agentic era. Reimagining content with a new vision. If you're writing content for UI adoption, how is that going to look? Are we thinking about ontology? Are we thinking about terminology changes? How will we need to keep it consistent across all the other products that connect together? These are some of the challenges that you'll need to think about as you go along. And then also reinvent roles and responsibilities. Think about it. For the first time in many years, we probably will not be a downstream team, because we'll be thick in the middle of conversations that we need to have with many cross-cloud teams or stakeholders, such as product managers, PMM, even UX. I can share a small, quick story. A couple of weeks back, Salesforce hosted Dreamforce. I'm sure many of you have heard. One of the PMs from my cloud came back and shared kudos to our technical writing team and shared a story where he was thick in the middle of a conversation with a customer in a customer advisory board meeting. And the customer asked him a question for which he didn't have an answer because it was cross-cloud cutting. He knew about his own cloud, but he wasn't sure how it affects and how it'll work across. What did he do? He goes and searches on the agent that is installed on top of our help portal, and he was able to find the answer for it. And lo and behold, he was able to not only help the customer, but it resulted in a big customer win. So our roles go much deeper than what we think it is for today if we are reimagining the way we'll work in the future. So there's lots to be done. It's ending in one ways, but it's rebirthing in another ways. And how do we do that? Is through providing a safe space for our teams to create study hall sessions where we create a safe environment to learn for people with different learning abilities, they're at different levels, Not everybody may be at the same level of learning with AI, and that's okay. But we are in it together. And when you do it as a community, it becomes much easier. Providing a framework for experimentation is also important, telling them what kind of use cases to test it on. Are we doing for everything? That becomes chaotic. So what use cases, which tools to use is also important as a leader to provide that information. Create space for ideation and feedback. If you do it as a pod, which is what we did on our team, it was way more successful because people were trying it together for like products, and the stories were similar, the use cases were similar. They were able to brainstorm ideas and try and test together and provide feedback to each other. So it was much easier to do it along with someone. The next point is encourage learning time on a weekly basis. And this is the conversion of the me time into AI time. My me time just converted to AI time. Because on a weekly basis, we do need to keep up with what's changing. It's so fast paced that if you let that go, you're not in the know. So providing that not for just yourself, but also allowing your teams to set that on their calendars and telling them it's okay to learn, set aside time, block it, and learn. The next is track AI innovation. Not only time spent, but also time saved. This is another way where all those people in the beginning who are not very sure of how this AI transformation is going to work get converted the moment they see these numbers. For us, just out of this morning, one of the experiments we did with converting or automating API writing, 60% of time saved, from previous when we were doing it manually. So it's important to do it collectively together as a team, much more successful that way. Okay, so we saw how AI is reshaping. We saw what can we do from the human side. What can leaders do to get there, right? And I'd like to urge each of you to think about this. It's not a leader when you have a designation. Everybody is a leader. You're in a position to influence someone or the other on your team or in your stakeholders' team. So each one of you is a leader. The first and foremost point is lead with clarity. Focus on outcomes. I think this is very important because I can share an experience. About a few months back, our executive leadership came and told us, we don't have any more allocation or budgeting for peer reviewers and editors. And we are going to cut it from next month. But what does that mean? How are we going to wade through it? What is the short-term view on it? What is the long-term? How many hours? What kind of content are we ready to let go of peer reviews and whatnot? If I had gone and told my team that we are doing this and it's a cold cut, it would have been chaotic and full of panic. But rather, we got together with the leadership team and strategists and figured out these are the areas where we can't let go and probably will have a midterm solution for it, and these ones will have a long term. When we did it that way, we have such huge success. We currently use Notebook LM to do quality checks on our content. We dump everything there. We have our style guide there. They run through it. And just this morning, my peer reviewer was telling me she sees such a huge change in how many things she catches in the peer reviews. It's way better. So when you have that clarity, it really works. And as Mel Robbins says, leaders bring the weather. So in terms of chaos, you are the ones as leaders who will bring that clarity. The next point is model behaviors of curiosity. We all know that leading by example is the way it goes. Whatever you say doesn't matter, what you do does. People are watching what you do. So even if you're a leader, learning and setting aside time, sharing your experience with your team, even being vulnerable and saying what is not working with you for you is also something that inspires them that you're just like them, you're one of them, and it's fine, we're all in this together. So another important aspect. Connect to understand, not enforce. I think this has been successful specifically on my team. Rather than trying to push forward areas of AI adoption, trying to understand where those blockages are. Probably it's a genuine issue, and when you talk to them, you find out and you kind of problem solve together. So not enforcing, but empathize and understand. And allowing flexibility in adoption. Let's face it, every team is going to have different kind of people. some that are cautious adopters and some who are thrill seekers who jump right in and test stuff out right from the beginning, and that's fine. And for others, they like to go into decided areas and follow the experimentation that's already done. That's fine too, giving them that space, and slowly they come around. So that we have to keep in mind. And empowering autonomy and ownership for teams, because things are changing very fast on a daily basis. If we keep loops of bureaucracy, you're going to only slow down your team. So it's important to give them that autonomy and power to make those decisions, but definitely give guardrails and then let them go. AI is actually how we shape it. Adopting AI is less about technology and more about creating a culture where teams can safely test, learn, and innovate. Because when the right mindset leads, innovation follows. And as Sundar Pichai said, it's all about augmenting human capabilities. It's not about taking something away that we already do. So it's adding on top. And now the call to thought, right? As I said in the beginning, when you walk away from here, here are the few things that I'd like you to think about, whether or not you're leading teams, even by yourself. How might you help your teams lead with curiosity and not fear when it comes to AI? What part of your work could be amplified if you gave yourself permission to experiment? It could be big, small. How will you shape AI to serve and not replace your human creativity? Because you are still the hero of this AI story. Thank you.
Can you guys hear me? Sorry. Very cool. Yeah, hey everyone, my name is Elvis, CM His. I live here in SF. I go to Epic Church. I work at a startup called Chalk. We do machine learning infrastructure, mostly for fintech, and I'm a developer advocate. Yeah, and so I wanted to give a talk about this awesome project called KSON. They came out of stealth. It's an open source project, and they came out of stealth probably like a month ago. And it's a modern, but also human-friendly configuration language. And so I'm very bullish on this, and I think we can kind of get rid of a lot of YAML with KSON. So yeah, so the first thing is there are a bunch of configuration languages, and I think what ends up happening is as projects get bigger, I'm sure people have experienced like working with like Docker and Kubernetes. A lot of like platform teams will eventually like make their custom DSLs that eventually like, you parse them and then you end up spitting out YAML for like GitHub Actions or something. And my hope here is that we can essentially give more structure to some of these projects and some of these configuration files through KSON. And so these are 3 pretty popular configuration files. I think ini is pretty simple and very readable, and so it's really good for like small projects, but it doesn't work well for like really structured data, and so you wouldn't want to use it to like send payloads over the wire or anything. And then there's YAML, which is very human friendly, very easy to read, but there's this really awesome article called the YAML document from hell that gives a bunch of examples of these various edge cases where YAML ends up failing and ends up being ambiguous. And then there's JSON, which is like super precise, but would be really difficult to work with when you're like trying to edit it yourself. And one of the biggest cons of JSON is that you can't add comments. And so it's hard to essentially like annotate parts of a JSON document and then give clarity around what does this field mean? Yeah. Yeah. And so configuration languages are also all over the software development lifecycle. And so my hope here is that with KSON, we can kind of like reconcile a bunch of these different workflows and use cases to have one config, right? And so, yeah. And so I have this quick quote, and this is from one of the KSON maintainers, Adolfo. And he, in a blog post, he essentially said that once you start thinking of configuration languages as user interfaces, you essentially now have a higher bar for what you expect from them in terms of what they can do for you. And so him and Daniel, so this next slide. So him and Daniel have been working. So Daniel started working on KSON about like 3 years ago. And Daniel's actually here in SF. But he was an early engineer at Looker and worked a bunch on essentially their DSL, as well as like their IDEs. And then he also built a bunch of extensions for IntelliJ for handlebars and mustache. And so this is kind of his like pet dream project. And it's kind of like a love letter to developers. So I'll give you an example of what KSON looks like. I guess benefits first. So the main benefit is that KSON was designed explicitly to be very human readable. It's also type safe. And so it's technically a superset of JSON. So I can actually drop a JSON file or a JSON dictionary or whatever into a KSON file, and then I can reformat it, and then I get the super human readable thing, and then I can compile it down back into JSON, and it's lossless. So we don't like lose anything. He's also done a bunch of stuff around code blocks, and so it actually supports syntax highlighting. And so I can essentially have a code block and say like this is TypeScript, and then I can get like syntax highlighting, which is super helpful. And so yeah, so this is a plain JSON file. So we have a person, we have some attributes like name, we have another dictionary under it for favorite books, their favorite numbers, and then their favorite function. And so if I were to reformat this into KSON, it would look like this. So it feels a lot like YAML. This might be a little bit hard to see, but one of the nice things about this is that when you're defining lists, there's a bunch of like these like smaller annotations that essentially identify, oh, this is a list, and then you can essentially specify when you want a list to end. And so we kind of need this for it to be not white space sensitive. And so that's like one of the differences between YAML. And then the other thing I wanted you to see is down here with the TypeScript, you can specify that this is TypeScript, and now we get, this super nice syntax highlighting, right? And so I just made this quick graphic to show that like we can go back and forth between KSON and JSON super easily. And so this is really nice because you can essentially build like developer tooling such that you can have essentially linters and essentially things run that conversion, and then you can build them into like your CI/CD, right? And so yeah, so this is back to JSON. Yeah, so this like when we compile it back, that KSON, we get the same JSON back. And so there's also two other views. So there's a delimited view. And so this is just like another, I guess, quality of life thing where we explicitly add delimiters to the different objects. That way it's super clear when they end and don't end. And this is really helpful when you have super nested JSON objects, if you're like 4 or 5 levels deep. And so this is when we bring back these like curly brackets. We have these, lesser than, greater signs. And this is also just nice for the user to be super explicit about when an object ends. And then there's also a compact mode. And so this is what it looks like in compact mode. And because it's white space insensitive, we can actually have a bunch of things be on one line and essentially compress this file and make it a lot smaller. And this is really great eventually for like reducing input tokens, right? If you're like trying to talk to an LLM. And so this is also very promising work. And then, yeah. And so what I've been experimenting with is essentially replacing a bunch of markdown files with KSON. And so the idea here is that we love markdown because it's very readable, right? But it's like, ideally, if we can keep the structure and these strong guarantees that we get with JSON while not losing the readability with KSON, then I'm able to build like tooling around my documentation to eventually have things like, oh, I want to lint all of my docs all at once, or I can essentially run all my documentation through like jQuery, for example, and then like run validators that way. Or I can systematically extract like every code block on these sets of pages and then run them in like GitHub Actions to make sure that they work. And then that can be blocking to like a PR, right? And so my hope is that, yeah, KSON just gives us these strong guarantees. And the nice thing is that Adolfo and Daniel are working on custom validators. And so I'm actually going to go over one slide real quick. And so it's kind of hard to read, but KSON has an LSP, a language server protocol. And so if you look down here, I can essentially, in my editor, get information back about why KSON isn't valid. And so if you couple this with a custom validator, we can eventually say like, this object needs to have these types for these fields. And then you can see them in your IDE that it's breaking those changes. And so this is going to be super helpful for like having a better feedback loop before you actually, push it to GitHub Actions or something like that. Yeah. So that's super exciting. That's still a work in progress. They have a really good abstract out for the next JSON schema conference. And so once that conference publishes, I think they'll have a paper as well. Yeah. And so the things that I've been thinking about is like, there's also CLI tool. And so the nice thing about the CLI tool is that I can do this, KSON JSON conversion back and forth. And then I can also have the KSON validate that particular KSON file. And then I can just give that as a tool to my LLM. That way, when the LLM is writing docs, right, I can also have it run these validators to make sure, it does things correctly. And then there's IDE extensions for VS Code and IntelliJ. Yeah, and that's it. Yeah. So this is a QR code to the Zulip if anyone wants to join the Zulip. And then these are the primary maintainers. So it's Daniel, who's here in SF, Adolfo, who's in Chile, and then Bart is in Berlin. That's it for my talk. So then you end up having like this K logo, but then you have the curly brackets for the,
But I'll try to stay in the camera. Hello, everyone. I'm Ethan. Doug was very gracious to let me change the topic after he'd already sent all the marketing materials. So originally, I was going to be talking about AI tooling. There have been a lot of talks about that recently, some really wonderful ones. I recommend checking out last meetup for that. Also, I'm a team of one, so my tooling is whatever I want and not applicable to a lot of teams. So now I'm going to talk about giving feedback, how it is a great way to level up your career and a skill that I think technical writers are exceptional at and you should be good at to grow. And the name is, what does AI native even mean? And if you're newer in your career, I hope that this can help inspire you to start giving feedback. If you're farther along, maybe you think of ways to encourage someone here, reflect on work you've done, or maybe someone you work with later can help reap a benefit from this. But I'm a technical writer at Mintlify. We're like 2 blocks that way. I live in San Francisco, not a big basketball fan, and usually more of a listener, but I do like to talk, which is what I'm doing right now. So this is the problem. This term, AI native, it's kind of small on the screen, but at my work, it was getting used all the time. Mintlify is a documentation hosting platform. Being AI native is one of the things that we are. However, every team meant something different. The engineering team usually meant that we had been built from the ground up with these tools. Sales used it to say we're better than a competitor. I used it to not know what it meant and kind of argue with our marketing director. But I realized I could help. I can create clarity. I think everyone here does it professionally. I also know a lot about AI as it relates to documentation. I'm the only technical writer at a documentation hosting platform, a subject matter expert. And I also think that when you see a problem, you should try to fix it, both because it's the right thing to do, and it really feels good to help out and solve problems, and also to be seen as someone who can do that. So this is the very practical slide. What did I do? I wrote a Notion doc. I wrote a doc. It's what I do. It's what I think 80% plus of you do. Then I had one-on-ones with stakeholders to get some buy-in on what I believed AI native meant. And then I shared with a wider team, so we have a shared understanding. We use the same language, and we grew from there. Now, I'm at a very small company, so I can physically walk over and have these one-on-ones. And I recognize, depending on where you are, this might not be as easy. However, I think the general framework will work. And this is coming from when I was at a 3,000 person company, is if you get in writing, both because it helps you think about what you want to say, what you believe, also it's enduring, better than a Slack message, an email, whatever other communication tool that is ephemeral, then you have some of those buy-in conversations, whether it's people on your team, someone who is a PM for the product you work on, or whoever, and then share it wider, and it can take hold. And if it's something small, like you noticed a quality assurance thing when you were documenting a new release, hopefully you can get that fixed real quick. If it's a large brand defining idea about what your product is and what's on your landing page, it might take longer though. So I also kept talking about AI native, so I figured I originally was going to talk about AI tooling, so I will say what I meant by AI native in case it's interesting to people, or if you want to find me later and give feedback and say like, I really disagree with you, that's not what AI native is. I love to hear it. But it's not just having features. That was what I kept bumping into with the engineering team. Like, it was about understanding how documentation is really facilitating transfer of knowledge when AI is a primary interface. And to make it easy, I went with 3 pillars. The rule of threes is great for comedy and technical writing. You can have AI native features that help you read. Maybe this is like a chat bot on your docs. You use Inkeep, Kappa, or another tool. It's how you write, and I believe it should fit into a human workflow, kind of like Priya was saying. Like ultimately, we are augmenting our abilities, not replacing. And then also discovering your documentation hopefully shows up in AI tools and it's not hallucinating things. So the impact here, I mentioned, feels good to look smart, to be useful, but product engineering now can use this read, write, discover framework to explain launches to our sales team and customer success. This really helps get everyone on the same narrative, communicate better with each other so we can communicate better to our users. Marketing and sales streamline their language, very helpful. There have been a lot of conferences these past couple months. There's more coming up. We know what to say when we meet people in person. And then I got to help my team work better together. And when it comes to leveling up, getting back to kind of the theme of this talk, your insights as a technical writer are product insights. You might have a super niche where you're embedded on one thing and you know it so well, you know it better than a lot of other people. Or maybe you have broad cross-cutting knowledge. That's also something that other people might not have. So I really encourage everyone to think there is something that you're an expert on. And then giving feedback outside your domain is a form of leadership. It can be intimidating. I think especially for me when I was at a larger company, it felt kind of near useless to toss ideas out there. However, eventually I would see that issues I opened would get closed because there'd been a change. And when you define the terms, you can help shape the decisions. In this case, I felt a huge stake in saying what AI native means for documentation because, like I mentioned, I'm the only technical writer at a documentation hosting platform. I want to really speak for my fellow writers and users and say, no, from my experience, my empathy, this is what we should believe about ourselves and this is what we should build for others. And no matter what you're working on, I think you have that opportunity. And then finally, show off your human abilities. There's a lot of talk about AI. It will continue to exist. We're really good at making these sorts of connections. Yes, you could put in all of your info into an LLM and see what it says in terms of feedback, but we're better than that. And I think we will be for a long time. So how to start? You can do something really small. What doesn't make sense? What's a bug in the UI? What's something you just have noticed is kind of weird? That can be something to give feedback on. Bigger opportunities, what do you know a lot about? Or what is a point of friction on your team? And then what is the Venn diagram of those two items? That's what I encountered. That was my anecdote. But you don't have to immediately have that come to mind. And then I'm happy to answer any questions, but just in case, I put some seed questions to ask all of you. So I'll invite answers as well as questions. Yeah, well, I'll start saying there were some battles I very much gave up on. And I was like, well, I guess that one's not happening. I think it is, this is speaking just from my experience. I'd love to know if other people have this. What I've done is keep sharing what I've written in other spaces. So it could be like on a Slack channel, or I see someone say something relevant, which can feel like nagging or perhaps unsavory. But then also mentioning it like when I have in-person conversations with people, or that could be on Zoom or facilitated in DMs if you work remotely. But I think just if it is something that I believed strongly should be changed, and I had an idea that at least could get us to where to go, to hang on to it. But I don't have the energy to do that with absolutely everything. So that was kind of the AI native one is a good example. I was like, we can't keep talking around each other. And ultimately, like my breakthrough there was our head of marketing also got frustrated with those discussions. So I was like, oh, now I have an ally. And so if you get one person, then you get two, then you get however many you need. Yeah, I really like that. I'm just going to repeat just in case people in the back end here, but if it's something that even if you're not getting feedback, but if you have the capacity to act on it yourself and can make the time and do that, that could be a way to take agency and just be the change. Cool. Well, thank you, everyone. Here's my cat chewing on a YubiKey, and that's how you can reach me for email if anyone wants to talk, but you can also find me on LinkedIn.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sreya. I work at Oracle, and today I will share with you my thoughts about some key human skills in the age of AI. These opinions are mine and not my employer's, just had to make that clear. What comes to mind when you think about a machine versus human? Any words that pop in your mind? Cold, yeah. Automated, okay. What about the human? Empathy, yeah. So I had a similar sort of bunch of words in my head. And please don't laugh at this graphic, but it was just something I was just messing around, and I thought I should put it here to add some humor. But I sort of put this sort of weird crack between the two, which is probably in my mind. But there's a lot of words that come to mind, right? Empathy, creativity on the human side, dealing with complexity, dealing with unstructured, inconsistent information, um, applying critical thinking, fact finding, research, accuracy, right? Pattern recognition. And I added that on both sides because I figure there's different kinds of patterns that machines would be good at versus humans would be good at. And on the machine side, I didn't put a lot of keywords. It's all I know is, it's good at routine, standardized, tangible, and explicit work. So these were just like thoughts to get this kicked off. But I will start with, this is not my own frame, but it's from someone that I followed for many years. I used to be an instructional designer before I became a technical writer. And I had a blog, and we had a community of bloggers way back like 15 plus years ago. And that's how we connected. And that was also when like social networks were coming up. Twitter was new ish. LinkedIn, there were these tools, and we were all connected, and we would connect as bloggers. We would connect as people across the globe. Different people would quote each other's blogs and, learn from it. One person that I noticed a lot of what he used to talk about then suddenly became relevant today. This is Harold Jarkey, and we used to all talk about social learning, learning from social networks, learning from people, other people, and having these knowledge networks. As a knowledge worker, who basically, like, that's what we all are. We seek knowledge as we do our jobs, and we reach out to other people on the network or in your peer and other people. And there's formal learning, but there's also informal learning in the form of social learning through your networks. So that's another weird diagram I drew. Um, but this is a quote that I found recently in Harold's blog. So it's not something new, but he has been talking about this in the previous transition when machines took over certain labor-intensive jobs. And this is happening again in the age of AI. And I would like to read this out loud. It's a little bit long, but for the past several centuries, we have used human labor to do what machines cannot. First, the machines caught up with us and surpassed humans with their brute force. Now they are surpassing us with their brute intelligence. There is not much more need for machine-like human work, which is routine, standardized, or brute. But certain long-term skills can help us connect with our fellow humans in order to learn and innovate. So some of the words I had in my previous slide were influenced by Harold's curiosity, sense-making, cooperation, and novel thinking. His name is Harold Jarkey, and I'll give you his blog links at the end of this presentation. And he also talks about some other things which will come up in my future slides. But this was like a cool time when we were all kind of excited and learning about how do people learn, thinking about how people do their jobs. And this just suddenly, in the age of AI, it feels like this happened before and it's happening again, and it's suddenly relevant. Moving on, what human skills that I think that will be valuable in these times? And I know Priya touched on some of them. Ethan, you did as well. And so domain expertise, for sure. We all write about products, services, tools, hardware, and learning our product well, we will still work with stakeholders who are the official domain experts. But I think over time, technical writers have long been very knowledgeable about their products, not always recognized as subject matter experts, but people who worked in certain products for a long time often know a lot. And that has not been recognized, but it is certainly a skill that we can fall back on right now in these times where AI is going to take over some of those routine jobs. But at the same time, if you learn to you learn your product or service and learn more about the customer, you will be able to actually generate high quality documentation and focus on the value added work. Stakeholder empathy and inclusivity. Empathy is definitely something that technical writers learn to do in their job, in their day-to-day job. Dealing with review comments is one. That is my personal one, where you get a lot of conflicting feedback, or you get totally different perspectives from two completely different people who do not want to talk to each other, right? And you're the HR trying to figure out what to do about it. So that happens a lot, and it's not bad. It's all good. It's all to the goal of producing high quality, accurate, and complete documentation for your customers. However, that's where the empathy aspect comes in, as trying to see, being that person to be able to see both perspectives and put it together and really be able to bring that into your documentation output. With this, I have a little story. I'm currently working with a first-time stakeholder. I'm in a cross-product team, so sometimes we work with people we've never worked with before. He's located in China, and I, took this over, and I said, okay, I'm going to work on this, and I start like, okay, the time difference is quite a bit. Let me start a Slack conversation. So I pinged him a couple of initial questions on Slack. No response. Then I followed up the next day. So I'm looking at the time. Slack gives me his time, right? So I can see he comes online at certain times, and then he doesn't respond. Then I followed up, and no response again. I'm like, what's going on? And then I'm like, okay, what do I do now? So I can work on something else until he gets back to me. In the meantime, he emails my colleague. He somehow thought he was working on this, and he reached out to him over email. So my colleague looped me in. And then I'm trying to understand what is going on. Like, why didn't he respond to me on Slack? So here's where the empathy comes in. You're trying to put yourself in this person's shoe. He's in a completely different country, totally different culture, different language, different first language. English may not be his first language. So I'm trying to make assumptions and guesses about what might be going on. Maybe he likes email better. He had copied a bunch of people, including his manager. So maybe he wanted to loop people in and he didn't want to leave them out. I don't know what it is, but it's a different way in which he works. So I changed my strategy based on some assumptions, and I sent email instead with a few quick, short questions, very direct, so that in case he's using a translator, it does not miss things that I put into a very conversational, verbose sentence in an email. That worked immediately. And then I send my next set of questions, and I get a response immediately. And in this manner, I'm able to collaboratively include him throughout the steps of developing my content. And I think that's great. We're making progress. So here's where, as human beings, we can adapt. We can imagine, we can make some assumptions, we can test our theory, and we can figure out the best way to work with another human being in a different part of the world. So some of this I thought would connect with a lot of us. Partnership and collaboration skills. I wanted to call that out more in terms of building these long-term relationships with our stakeholders, internal and external both. People who work on the field with the customers, including, and also the internal stakeholders, and just building those relationships of trust over time. That continues to be a very important skill for a technical writer. Sense making. There's a little bit of that in Harold's blog. He will talk about it, but it's really about, sense making is really about the skill that you need to be able to take all these disparate pieces of information, put it together in a very in a clear and articulate manner for your customer to understand exactly what your product does, what it means. And it's sometimes you're dealing with very complex workflows or complex products and services. And the last one is definitely not the least. Critical thinking and fact finding in the age of AI is going to be the most important skill. Asking relevant questions, looking for the facts, checking the facts, checking AI generated output to ensure that you are actually delivering high value, accurate content to your customers. So AI can augment your job, it can make things faster, but these are the places where human beings and especially technical writers can play a role. And these skills are going to be really important in the next phase. Personal knowledge management definitely comes from Harold's blogs. He used to talk about it a lot. He still does. It's still relevant. And I just wanted to put a quick diagram from his website, jarkey.com. Seek, sense, share. That's the gist of it. You seek information, you make sense of it, you share it, and it's a cyclical process. So what is PKM? I pulled it out of his blog post, a set of processes individually constructed to help each of us make sense of the world and work more effectively. In other words, you're building your meta skills. Navigating disruption. It's really important to disrupt things, right? And that's what's happening right now. But it's also important to then, after the disruption, structure things again. You put it together in a way that it starts to make sense to you. The disruption might keep happening, but really like being able to, like, again, one of my random diagrams, but really being able to navigate through this, find your way in this very changing world while managing your own personal and professional growth. That's where the PKM also comes in, the knowledge management, like how do you organize yourself and not get overwhelmed? How do you keep up with what's going on? There are some of these, lots of tips on Harold's blogs on that. Cutting out the noise, like a lot is going on, but how do you focus on learning what's the next important thing in your job or your role or your personal life that you need? And trying to anticipate eventually what might be next. And my one thing that I have with my experimenting with AI, if I can clearly visualize the outcome that I want, then my prompts are so much better and they actually help me save time versus just like being random about it. So that's where like having clarity about your technical writing tools, exactly what outcomes you want, and knowing the outcome in terms of the business goals and whatever it is that you need, having the clarity will definitely help you build better prompts on how to instruct AI to actually augment your task. So technical writing, a writer's human skills will continue to be critical. That's what I think. Keep developing them. Have confidence in your core skills, the ones that you build in your technical writing course. Know your audience, research your content sources, find the facts, partner and collaborate with human teams, master your own product and skill set, and use critical thinking, fact-checking skills to verify AI-generated output. So this is like a random quote from from social media, no offense to anybody, but it's just supposed to like make a point that I connected with, mainly the end. AI isn't like just like an intern, but a dishonest intern. And that's where I thought it would tie in nicely to Shivangi's talk about teaching AI not to lie. With careful supervision, it can be productive enough to be useful, but you have to know what it is doing better than it does and watch it like a hawk. And unless there is something specific it offers that saves you time or gives you access to information you wouldn't have otherwise, it probably isn't worth the effort. I'm starting to wonder if the necessary skill for the AI age is going to be knowing where those lines should be drawn. I feel like I run into this a lot. Like sometimes I'm heading in a direction that's not AI is not going to save my time. And I think it's really sort of interesting to be aware of this in a time when we're all in this research-oriented R&D mode and trying to figure out what's the best way to have AI augment your task and actually save your time. And those are some of the links to specific articles on Harold's blog. But if you would like to connect with me on LinkedIn, that's a QR code. Otherwise, I'm happy to take any questions. No questions. Okay. Thank you all.
Hi, everyone. And thank you so much for sticking around so far. It's been amazing. Some of these talks have been great for actually the topic I'm referring to. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about myself so you know why I'm talking about what I'm talking about. I'm a computer science and linguistics student, and I have a strong love for language, way more than I have for programming. And I'm a technical writer. I worked with Oracle over the summer, in fact, as a technical writer, had a great experience. And I'm the founder of Spark and Nudge. Now, what is Spark and Nudge? It is an edtech platform that I'm trying to build for students to learn career storytelling. Initially, it started with workshops, it's fine. And at this point, I realized that AI is definitely booming. So one-on-one human workshops are not the only solution. I was trying to productize something that did not exist yet, at least for students. And then I started to build our own AI brain. And this is where I realized why my technical skills are suddenly so relevant. And I fell in love with the idea. And I started to build our own AI brain. And as you go through these slides, you'd see a large portion of this come to life if you want to test it out. So I have created a whole project guide. If you want to follow through and actually test it with your own writing as well, you can do that. All right. Okay, so the challenge was building a credible AI chatbot. As you know, the title of my talk was Teaching AI Not to Lie. So what I'm trying to teach is that AI cannot hallucinate. One of the key challenges right now is that when it's not able to find information, it doesn't say, I don't know. It creates information. And that's where technical writers play a vital role. We are humans. We fact check, we make sure what it says, it's correct. Humans just read and accept it. Essentially, what I was trying to do is ensure that my chatbot doesn't lie to my customers, because we are just a small company. We are trying to build credibility. We are not a massive documentation based enterprise, right? Some of you might be working in one, but this is a start. What I looked at was that the data needs to be validated. For example, whether that is workshop information, prices, policies, all of that. This is just the beginning. Then it comes to the ethical guidelines. Why? Because most of the career coaches are giving a lot of information out. I'm trying to repel that. I'm not saying hustle, I'm trying to tell them to be intentional with it. Now, if that philosophy is not translated clearly into the AI brain, then it starts to talk like all the other chat GPTs and career coaches out there. So my documentation needs to have the ethical values that I have for my readers. The next step was getting user feedback. That was pretty easy once I started to do one-on-one workshops and making sure that they are recorded. This is super important. So in your case, it could be customer feedback, interactions that you're having with your product managers, or any of those interactions. They're all examples. They're all valuable for creating this. This document is our AI corpus. And this is what we need to actually train our AI. Okay. How do we know our AI isn't hallucinating, and how do you catch it before users do? Eventually, we will answer this question, but I would love to know if anyone has any thoughts on it. I like the smiles. I know some people have thoughts on it, but okay, let's get into it. So AI training documentation, it's a funnel from what I've understood so far. We need to see the accuracy. We need to make sure that it's validated. We need to make sure that it's reliable. What we are testing is valuable and it's clear and it's effective. Because if the information out there is sounding like all the other noise, people do not have the patience for it. So there has to be effective evaluation of whether the text generator does the job it's supposed to do. One of the key examples that I'm going to bring up here is, like, have you seen ChatGPT ask you questions right after it gives you a solution and say, do you want me to do this next? That is how it keeps the conversation going. And it wouldn't give you super lengthy answers unless it's necessary. Now, that is something I learned when I started to write the corpus, that I actually have to teach it how to respond, how long to keep the answers, how to keep the conversation going, and how to sound more and more essentially like me. So here's what I did. I created a corpus and then I tested it with 30 test cases. And one of them failed. Now, in this case, 29 passed test cases and one failed test might seem like a very good result, but this is a very small start, a very small corpus. But it gives us an understanding of how AI is evaluating our writing. And when we learn this, our documentation becomes the training data for all our enterprise level AI training, essentially. Okay. So 25 pages, 5867 tokens. This is crucial because from what I understood from one of the conversations or talks here is that these tokens are valuable and there's a way to decrease them by using one of the other languages. I think it's KSON, right? So I think that is a good way and I would definitely explore that. And the other thing is that the lexical diversity. And once you test that, you realize that you need to have a key balance. The structure cannot solely be a variety of massive words because then you wouldn't have a certain tone or a way you sound or the AI is supposed to sound. So essentially, giving it personality means there has to be a repetition of certain words, but it cannot be so repetitive that there's nothing new about it left. So the lexical diversity is something that you master simply with iteration. Now, this looks super complex, but it's not. This is the training content, and there's a structure to it that I have built so far. You can keep on iterating, and I would love to hear thoughts on this from someone who's working on a higher level of this. Essentially, I broke it down into 8 parts. One of them was my brand and philosophy. So I wanted to make sure that the core values and the communication style that I am trying to iterate is into it. This could be for any brand. The second part of it was the conversation patterns. So we need to understand how our students essentially are interacting with the AI. What kind of questions are they asking? What is their mindset when they're interacting with the AI? Are they in doubt? Are they fearing something? Are they scared? And how can we make sure that our conversation style is sort of giving them peace? So we wanted to make sure it's motivational. It gives them answers, but it also provides them assurance. And this all goes into the AI corpus. The next step, edge case responses. Super crucial. We have to always think about how they will react to it. What kind of questions can happen and how they can result in a different response altogether. Ending conversations. I would move back to this a little later, but look at the factual information, explicit boundaries, which I have learned the best ways to tell AI if you do not know this information or cannot find it in the provided documentation, say, I don't know. And once it starts to say, I don't know, you know what gaps to fill in your documentation. Instead of making it lie, it starts to tell you exactly what it doesn't know. That's when technical writers become important because they have the information, and instead of them learning from AI, they start to teach it. The next is specific scenarios. This is what I mentioned earlier as well. If you're talking to customers, product managers, anyone within the team, start to record those conversations as examples to train your AI. And final reminders and red flags, certain things that you just want to keep off limits, and you want to make sure that the ending conversation ensures customer satisfaction. This can again be trained AI to do. For example, my AI was not asking questions. So what if I want the user to be engaged? So I learned from ChatGPT and said, always ask an ending question. Can I help you with anything? Is there anything else that you need help with today? And it certainly changed the tone in which it interacted. Okay, so which type of test should be conducted? Known answers, unknown answers, and edge cases. This is what I ran with. 10 known answers, 10 unknown answers, 10 edge cases. And then we were good to go to understand what the next 25 pages of my existing document should look like. Okay, so before testing, I analyzed what dominated my corpus, what words were making most of the space within the corpus. This told me that I'm using a lot of do you, are you, a lot of students, which meant that it had a clear understanding that this has to be conversational. This has to have certain level of student focus. But it also came with a very, very important risk, which is potential use. So now this told me what kind of words I need to tell AI not to use. So try to understand how it learns from us. And this really helped me navigate what are the top quality of words, what are the dominant ones, is that matching with how I want it to sound. For example, if it's a company which is strongly interacting with another, SaaS company or an AI startup, it wouldn't want to sound conversational. It might want to sound more corporate. So we can train AI to do that as well. In my case, I really wanted it to be as student focused as possible. Test one, how much does the resume workshop cost? We said the resume workshop costs a certain amount and gave a clear answer. We were good to go. And these are actual answers generated by AI for now, so pulled right from the corpus, and it was perfect. But right now, you might see that it's not asking any follow-up questions as well, because it's the first version of the AI corpus. The second thing, what's Sparkinut's annual revenue? Now, that is not an information that you'd want a customer to have or interact with when it's talking to our AI. So essentially, it just says, I don't have that information in my knowledge base. And it's a good start instead of it starting to hallucinate and producing a paragraph long of conversation that is not really required. In this case, I created a boundary awareness within my corpus and allowed AI to learn from it. Test 3, edge case. This worked perfectly. For example, it asks, I have applied to 100 jobs and got nothing. What should I do? And by the way, this is a very real example of a student talking about this. And here's what happened. I have mentioned this before to my students as well. Like, hey, I think you should apply super intentionally to 5 jobs that you really, really want, and you might actually land one. Right? And that's when I realized that that has to be taught AI. That is where my AI becomes distinguished from Claude, ChatGPT, or any other AI that they're daily interacting with. So it matched our philosophy exactly, rejected the mass application, and clearly told the story of what Sparkinut stands for. Now, the test 4, this is the actual one that failed. So they say nobody responds to my LinkedIn messages. And this is also a question that was asked by one of my students that I tested with AI. And it said, it sounds like you need a personal branding workshop. And it looks and sounds super, super salesy. And we don't want that. We want our AI to be an actual diagnostic solution. So I needed to fix my corpus to tell a clear understanding and process step-by-step iteration of how to land the pitching part of the workshop. So it needs to run a diagnostic analysis like what field do you work in? What are the kind of people you're trying to reach out? And what kind of messages are you sending to them? And here's a template of a message that I would like to send. And once that has already worked, then you pitch in the workshop. This is an iteration that will happen in the next version of the corpus, so AI doesn't answer like that. So here's what my key learnings were from this entire process. One, AI mirrors structure. So the better structure you provide, the better it will iterate and respond. It provide explicit examples, record every conversation, every human interaction. That is your training data more than anything else out there. No documentation can train better than the conversations and questions that your customers are asking you. Test early. I did it with the first version, which was just 25 pages and gave me so much feedback to start off from. So test early. Start to see where the gaps are in the documentation that is already existing within your company. And then finally, iterate effectively. Try to test them and get clear, concise notes and takeaways from what needs to be iterated. What are the gaps and where we can improve? What you can do, start with test questions. If you do not have an existing corpus, start with building test questions, questions that you want your AI to answer correctly, and see whether it is able to do it or not. And that is your beginning. Test cases. Use this Google Colab. There will be a link on the next slide, and you are able to test it, feed your corpus into it, and also run the test cases to see how well it is performing. It is pretty simple process, and you should be able to do it once you actually test out the GitHub. And don't wait for perfection, test early, catch problems. And this is the best way to learn how to train AI, and a key skill that I believe technical writers will need in the future. I'm still getting into the industry and I am a student, but I think this is something that we can definitely evolve and make space for. Finally, get the tools. This is the GitHub repo, so you can take a picture of that and you can actually test this out. It has a Python script, which is a collab notebook. It has 30 starter test questions, which is like a clear documentation template as well. So you can quickly test and iterate with your edits as well, and a sample corpus structure so you can play around with it. Finally, this is what I think technical writers aren't being replaced. We are becoming the people who teach AI not to lie. This is my LinkedIn. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I am a student at San Jose State University, and I'm currently looking for internship opportunities for next year. And if you have something cool coming up, I would love to connect with you, and I would love to answer any questions anyone has. Thank you. Thank you so much.